How's it going, everybody? In this video, I'm going to be showing you a super fun budget ooze tribal deck. We're going to be using this ooze as our commander. It has storm, so it can enter the battlefield with more copies of itself, and it enters the battlefield with +1/+1 counters on it for each other ooze we control. There will be a lot of oozes on the battlefield, so this card can get pretty large. In general, this deck wants to summon a bunch of ooze creatures and create a lot of tokens. We then want to grow them with a lot of counters. Kind of keeping the idea with the oozes as they die, we're looking to create more tokens and distribute those counters that are already on the oozes to other oozes. So essentially, they don't really die. They kind of just get respread throughout the board. Biogenic ooze is nice since it enters the battlefield, we get to create another ooze. And at the beginning of each end step, we're going to put a +1/+1 counter on each ooze we control. We can also pay 4 mana to create a 2/2 ooze creature, and this is not once per turn. Whenever an inexorable blob attacks, if we have Delirium, we're going to create a 3/3 ooze that's also tapped and attacking. And consuming blob's power and toughness is equal to the number of card types among creatures in our graveyard. However, at the beginning of our end step, we're going to create another ooze token that is essentially the same card as this. Ultra Jelly is going to enter the battlefield with X counters on it, and if it dies, if it had 2 or more counters on it, we're going to create a token that's a copy of it at the beginning of the next end step. That token enters the battlefield with half as many counters on this, rounded down. Slurk All Ingesting is going to enter the battlefield with 5 counters on it, and whenever this card or another creature we control dies, if it had a +1/+1 counter on it, we get to put another +1/+1 counter on each other creature we control that already had a +1/+1 counter on it. Ravenous Slime sort of turns off our opponent for our graveyard. If a creature would die, we exile instead, and we get to put counters on this card equal to the power and toughness of that creature. This card can get stupid big. Corrosive Ooze is nice in case our opponent's running some equipment cards. Acidic Slime is nice with the Death Touch and the ability to destroy something on the field. And Scavenging Ooze is nice since we can interact with our opponent's graveyard, as well as gain some life and grow this card in size. Gluttonous Slime is nice since it has Flash and Devour. So if our opponent targets one of our oozes, we can flash this in and sacrifice that target. Mitotic Slime is a 5 mana 4/4. Whenever it dies, we create 2 2/2s that also have, when this dies, we get to create 2 1/1s. Next up, Goblin Ooze has pay 1 green, sacrifice another creature, and put a counter on this card. Cards like this are nice to have in case our opponent targets something or tries to destroy one of our creatures. We can pay 1 mana, sacrifice that creature, and get some value out of it. When Splitting Slime becomes monstrous, we get to put a token on the battlefield as a copy of Splitting Slime. Whenever we cast a spell, Mana Plasm is going to get +X/+X to the end of turn, where X is that spell's converted mana cost. If we play multiple spells that turn, this card's going to get pretty big. Predator Ooze is indestructible, and every time it attacks, we get to put a counter on it. And whenever Predator Ooze kills something, we get to put another counter on it. Green Slime has Flash, and we can counter a targeted activate ability or trigger ability from an artifact or enchantment and destroy it. We can also foretell it for 1 mana. Bio-Waste Blob is going to give each of our oozes +1/+1, and at the beginning of each upkeep, if we control a commander, we get to create a token that's a copy of this card. When Oran Reef Ooze enters the battlefield, we get to put a counter on a target creature. However, even better, whenever this card attacks, we get to put a +1/+1 counter on each attacking creature that already has a +1/+1 counter on it. A lot of our ooze creatures will already have counters on it, so these cards will get even larger each combat phase. We're running 2 shapeshifters that act as oozes, however they don't specifically say ooze. The Chameleon's got protection from black, and we can also continually double its power for only 4 mana. When Bloodline Pretender enters the battlefield, we're obviously going to pick Ooze, and whenever another Ooze enters the battlefield, we're going to put a counter on this card. Scoop Mob's kind of a dumb card, but I like it. At the beginning of our upkeep, if we control 5 or more lands, we're going to put 4 counters on this. This continually triggers, so this card can get pretty massive. Experiment 1 is one of my favorite green cards. It fits the Ooze theme and also has Evolve, so it will grow in size. Gelatinous Genesis and Slime Molding will allow us to create some pretty big ooze tokens. Full Flowering can allow us to populate X times, which in this deck could be devastating. And Miming Slimes can allow us to create an ooze token where X is the greatest power among creatures we control. Onto some support cards, we're running this Planeswalker. It is going to give each of our creatures with a +1 counter on it the ability to tap and add mana. Whenever land enters the battlefield, if we have Evolutionary Sage on the field, we're going to be able to proliferate, so we can choose any number of permanents and or players and give them another counter for each counter they already have. The Yearhulk is nice since it's a pretty big body and we can distribute counters to our creatures. Both Incremental Growth and Increased Savagery are going to allow us to put a bunch of counters on our creatures. And Forced Adaptation is a nice 1 mana enchantment that states at the beginning of our upkeep we get to put a +1 counter on enchanted creature. Cards like Death's Presence, Gutter Grime, and Ooze Flux really fit the ooze archetype. Whenever a creature we control dies, we get to put X +1/+1 counters on another target creature we control, where X is that power of that creature that died. Whenever a non-token creature we control dies, we can put a counter on Gutter Grime. Then we get to put an ooze token onto the battlefield that has this creature's power and toughness are equal to the number of slime counters on Gutter Grime. Ooze Flux is going to allow us to pay mana to remove counters from another creature. Then we get to put a ooze token on the battlefield where X's number of +1 counters are moved this way. These are some fun cards that fit the ooze archetype pretty well. Swiftfoot Boots is going to give our creature a hexproof and haste, and since we're running a lot of green creatures, the Bestiary is going to allow us to scry and also help us draw some cards. Icon of Ancestry fits well with the ooze theme type, going to give it all of our creatures +1/+1. It can also help us draw into some more ooze cards. Rona's Monument is going to make our green creatures cost less. Eternal Witness and Pulse of Marasa is going to help us with some recursion and getting stuff back from the graveyard. Harmonize, Garruk's Uprising, and Colossal Majesty is going to help us with some more draw. Kenrith's Transformation and Beast Within are some nice removal cards to have. Mutant Spray is a nice card for 1 mana that can allow us to get a counter on a creature and fight another target creature. Some Artifact and Enchantment Hate are Creeping Mold, Reclamation Sage, and Return to Nature. Our board is going to get pretty massive, so a card like Overrun, if we draw it at the right time, will absolutely destroy and win the game. Evolutionary Leap is also a good way to make use of our cards that are being targeted for removal. We can sacrifice those creatures and reveal the top card of the library to reveal a creature card, and we get to put that into our hand. Vivian Reed's plus ability is going to allow us to basically draw another card. The negative ability is going to allow us to destroy Artifact, Enchantment, or a creature with flying. And if we do end up ulting, our creatures are going to get Trample, Vigilance, and Indestructible. We're running the basic package of Elves for some mana ramp. We're also running Arbor Elf, Rampant Growth, and Cultivate as some more mana cards. If Incubation Druid has a counter on it, it's going to add 1 to our mana pool, but if it has 3 or more, we're going to get to add 3 mana instead. The more counters that are on Gyro Sage, the more we can tap for mana. We do have the ability to give it counters, so this can essentially tap for a lot of mana. Fertility is nice since we can continually give it counters and then remove them to search for basic lands and put them onto the battlefield. Kara Metro is going to allow us to tap depending on how much devotion we have to green, and we will have a lot in this deck. And for some lands, we're running the Vastwood. If we tap it, we can put a counter on each green creature that enters the battlefield this turn. Tranquil Thicket is nice since we can just cycle it and get into the graveyard. Path of Ancestry is nice since we can scry every time we cast an ooze. And we're going to run 32 Forests. This deck is a lot of fun and pretty cheap. There's definitely a lot of cards you can add to upgrade this deck. I definitely missed some budget options too, so let me know down below what cards I should have added to the deck. Thanks for watching, everybody. Hope you enjoyed. Take care.